I'm convinced that my vocation, any vocation, is a mystery, so we delve into some unknown territory. But since you asked me to think about it, I thought back and I would say what's the clearest is that it's not clear, you know what I mean? So it's not as though there was always this persistent voice, you know, be a priest, be an oblate or something. That did not happen in my case. There was, if anything was consistent, it was the lack of consistency. There's nothing absolutely clear until one moment. But in any case, I grew up in a very religious family, Catholic family, but it was unique in the sense that we were inundated with religious. I had two uncles who were Jesuit priests, one uncle who was a Marist brother, an aunt who was a Benedictine nun, a cousin who was a Benedictine priest. And on top of that, my grandmother was a very good friend of the Bishop of Corpus Christi, the diocese where I grew up, and he was a frequent visitor to her house. So it wasn't as though the issue of vocation was ever formally presented, but with that many role models around and people that you run into, it's naturally part of what might happen in your life. But so I was close to my uncles, we had a close-knit family, so the example of these men who I admired, who I thought were really great, because first of all they didn't discipline me, but they were adults anyway, so I had this kind of interest. But I grew up in a small Texas town, played football, as is the wont of every, I guess, Texas kid in a small town play football. So I played an 8th grade team and wanted to play high school, but that probably would not happen in a little town where I grew up. But I found out about a school called a minor seminary. I wasn't sure what that meant. It had something to do with priesthood, but they had a great football team. And it's just the right size school. I thought I would make it. So I have to say the seeds of vocation were both in wanting to play football in high school and the example of my uncles. I grew up in the valley where there's oblates hanging from every limb of every bush. They're everywhere, the part of history. But I didn't know that. I just knew priests. We had diocesan priests in our parish, and across town there were oblates. I didn't know there was a big difference. So the oblate nature of my vocation did not originate from any particular person in the beginning. Really, the oblate part of my vocation came from the high school seminary where I went. It was, I think we had 16 or 17 oblates on staff. So there was a personality to fit every kid in the school. And we had some great ones. I really admired and loved these oblates. They were superb role models, and clearly they were oblates. So that's where I learned about oblates and the kind of style of their life and ministry, which is pretty much close to the people, even in the high school setting, that they felt close to us. So that communicated itself and was attractive. Together with the modeling of my family, my uncles. But one thing in particular happened at St. Anthony's that really impacted me. Looking back, I see it now. We periodically had these missionaries, foreign missionaries, oblates from Africa, from Indonesia, who would come and give these mission talks. I don't know if they were meant to be motivational, but they were. I can still remember, that's got to be 60 years ago, I can still remember the content of some of their talks and remember them by name, which means they must have created quite an impression. In any case, the real vocational decision for me came to go to the novitiate or not. And it wasn't as though there was a mass movement towards that, so you just kind of join the crowd, this is the next thing. It was the first time I really had to make a decision about vocation. But again, as I said, it wasn't particularly clear. It wasn't I didn't have this call, be an oblate, be a missionary, be a priest. It was, well, let me see what's behind what I see in these guys, you know, where do they get this spirit? Why are they the way they are? So the novitiate was universally and unquestionably the worst year of my life. It was very, very off-putting and discouraging and unpleasant and trying and a lot of other things you wouldn't want to see in front of a camera. But if nothing else, it was an endurance contest, and it got me into a situation where I then was an oblate, took first vows, and I did it out of faith, I guess. It wasn't just like, what's next? I'd take that step, but this can't be, the year I just had, could not be what caused oblates to be as great as I found them. So the next step, however, my years in formation made a huge difference, and they're really the source of the explicit nature of my vocation as an oblate, a missionary, where I set goals and all of that, and experienced community in a really adult community, not high school community. Adult community as both fun and meaningful. So I jumped in full force. But in those years of study and undergraduate and graduate, the thing that made the biggest difference in my life was being forced to go to the Oaxaca missions during my summers. So I had been asked to do studies in the summer to get a degree in, I forget what, something. Probably because I didn't know what I should do, so why not just continue going to school in the summer? I went to school at Loyola, New Orleans. And I enjoyed it. It was great. When I moved from philosophy to theology, the new staff said, "Oh, no, you've had enough of this school. We want you to go to Mexico and spend the summer in some godforsaken mountain village doing something." So I thought, of all the foolish, I said, I'm within a year of getting this degree and went through on. So it was a real crisis moment for me, but a real learning moment, because that summer changed my notion of vocation, mission, not so much priesthood, because I wasn't a priest and I wasn't around priests. I was alone in this mission station. But it was really motivational and clarifying. It was a turning moment, experientially, not vocationally, but it did help define what I thought an oblate was at his best. He was a missionary on the front line, working things out on his own. At great disadvantage. My Spanish was particularly poor. The only advantage was I was in a village where Spanish was a second language for everybody else. They were all Indians, so so my pride was not so bruised by my errors in Spanish, because in fact I set the standard of incorrect Spanish, because if I said something they figured it was the way to say it. So I'd say my vocation took form and energy because of that mission experience. And I had several. I went back a couple of years in a row, different villages, different people, but the same experience, just really invigorating. However, it also opened up other possibilities. As I started thinking about, well, the Peace Corps does this too. So I applied, well, I'm in the seminary. I applied to the Peace Corps, went to take the Peace Corps exam. And we ran into a lot of medical issues in the missions. I mean, serious ones, life and death and all of this stuff. And then I thought, well, my mom's a nurse and medicine. So, I mean, instead of narrowing my focus on oblate missionary life, it just expanded the possibilities. Again, I didn't have clarity. Instead of narrowing the choices kept getting bigger and bigger. So it's, again, mystery. Why is it that I was really in the story of my vocation journey is not indecision as much as many choices, just struggling back and forth and lack of clarity. And the interesting thing, I don't know if this happens for other people, but it's interesting. I can still remember laying on the floor at my ordination, and ordinations are complicated deals because you got the ceremony and you got your family and friends and invitations, and it's hard to concentrate on what's really happening because the peripheral stuff can be preoccupying. But anyway, I'm laying there, and so all I can just remember, I says, "Man, this is the right decision." And since then, when I got up, the hands laid on me, and from then on, the remaining 40 however many years that I've been an oblate priest, that decision has never been seriously questioned. Nothing ever happened to have me seriously question the validity and purpose and reason for my being an oblate priest.